Hi, welcome to Weekend Review, where we look at some of the headlines from the week. My name is Phil O'Connor. I'm the Live Enterprise Director here at the Oklahoman, joined by a cast this week from all across the newsroom. Got Ben Felder from the Watchdog Desk, Tim Willert from the Education Team, Darnell Mayberry from Sports, and of course my old friend Don McCoy, the Business Editor. Ben, let's start with news out of the Capitol and out of the state government. The state school superintendent got some good news this week.
Yeah, Superintendent Joy Hofmeister, she faced 4 felony charges that were filed last October actually. She was accused of basically colluding with a dark money group during her campaign for state superintendent when she knocked off the incumbent Janet Barisi. Those charges were filed almost a year ago. She had a preliminary hearing scheduled for a couple of weeks, and the district attorney announced earlier this week that he was dropping those charges against her and 4 others on the case.
And then she had a press conference on Monday.
Tuesday. It was announced Tuesday, and she had a conference Tuesday evening.
And the mood of the press conference, obviously, there was almost a sense of elation in that room.
Yeah, I mean, she had maintained she had said that she was innocent from the beginning, and the charges didn't really seem to affect her performance. I mean, she was still a pretty active and engaged superintendent, was still traveling across the state, still engaging with lawmakers, and very few of them actually called on her to resign or seemed to distance themselves from her. But she said that she was innocent all along, and she felt like the dropping of the charges confirmed that.
But the district attorney has made some comments that it's not necessarily over, right?
I mean, he has said that he, could reserve the right to refile the charges, and there's still a lot of unknown questions about why he dropped them. Does he still have a case? Conventional wisdom would be that if he just needed more time, he could have just always filed a continuance. So dropping the charges is pretty significant. And for Joy and her attorney, they see this as vindication, that this is behind them. This may be the district attorney trying to save face a little bit to say, hey, I could always return if I want to. This wasn't any kind of botched investigation on our part. We just learned some new information. But yeah, right now she feels like that this is in the past. We did interview her this week actually on the Political State podcast. She does believe that the charges in the past, but she felt like this was all along politically motivated. These accusations came when she was running in the Republican primary originally against Janet Barisi. We asked her if she felt like they'd be brought back up again, and she goes, oh, absolutely. Next year is an election year for her. She's running for re-election, and she expects it to be an issue brought up by whoever challenges her for the superintendent position.
And some of the initial evidence, at least, that was discussed was phone calls, right? Conversations,
text messages, and
essentially
colluding with an outside, with a PAC, with a dark money group, which is against the rules.
Those texts, if I recall, seemed to be pretty damning.
And how the DA presented them, there did seem to be that there was some communication happening between both sides. Her team has said that wasn't the case. Of course, they don't get into the details of an investigation that was pending, and they didn't really get into the details, now that the charges have been dropped. We asked a question, if she feels like this was a politically motivated investigation, is she going to take some kind of counteraction, maybe a lawsuit against the county? And she didn't really say no, and she didn't say yes to that question either.
And she is running again, right?
She is running for re-election next year, some may see her embattled because she is coming off these charges, but I think one of the reasons she was able to continue to not really skip a beat despite these charges is she does have a lot of political capital, especially in public education circles. She really rode a wave to election of resentment towards the incumbent. And a lot of people in public education circles, a lot of teachers and educators were really frustrated with the previous superintendent. And so almost from day one when these charges were filed, the public education community was backing her and showing support, and celebrated along with her earlier this week.
And then just quickly, we had a state senator that didn't fare so well with law enforcement this week.
Loveless, he was accused of embezzlement. The former state senator in Senate District 45, the kind of Mustang, South Oklahoma City area. He's been charged with embezzling his campaign funds, using those for personal use. He pled guilty earlier this week. He vacated that seat a few months ago, and there's actually a primary special election on Tuesday. 7 Republicans vying for that, 2 Democrats, and then the general election will be in September 12th, I believe.
A lot of fines, felony conviction, can't vote, can't be a lobbyist, can't work in state government. A lot of restrictions that were put on.
He won't be returning to the legislature, and he's agreed to pay back over $100,000 to the state general revenue fund. So I guess he's helping fill the budget hole even after leaving office. So.
Tough year for a lot of lawmakers, for sure. Tim, exciting day, first day of school this week. A lot of bright-eyed kids showing up. Aurora Laura was there the first day. Tell us a little bit about what you saw.
Well, from all accounts, the first day of school went pretty well. It was raining all day, and I think the weather helped because in the past they've had issues with heating and air conditioning, especially their air conditioning this early in August. I know there was a lot of support at Thelma Parks. That was the school I was at, and North Highland Elementary. Those are two elementaries that were on the, that were having some staffing issues, and didn't have a principal, and were missing a lot of teachers. And both those schools, apparently there were a lot of volunteers at both schools. I know a lot of teachers, a lot of kids at Thelma Parks at least, got a bunch of free supplies, didn't have to put out any money for supplies. Parents were told not to have their kid, not to buy any supplies at that particular school. I know there were a lot of volunteers out. So the first day, from what I was told, went pretty smoothly. The district is still enrolling students. In fact, between Tuesday and Thursday, they enrolled about 2,800 new students. So typically they have
this year we have about, what, 41,000, is that right?
About 41,000 students, not including charter schools. Charters are about another 5,000 to 6,000 students, and they'll start heading back to school about August 17th.
And then North Highland, talk a little bit about what was going on with North Highland this year.
Well,
that was a school that was targeted for being shut down.
Yeah, Aurora had recommended the closure of North Highland, changed her mind before the school board could consider the proposal. She was able to replace the principal, although there was a little mix-up with that. Apparently the person she had selected didn't pan out, didn't have her certification squared away. So they ended up promoting the gal that had been targeted to be her assistant principal. They moved her up into the principal role, and they replaced all the teachers. They were able to offer them a stipend, the remaining teachers and the new teachers they hired. So Aurora also promised some supports, including a couple of counselors and a therapist, and so the schools got off this year with some of those supports in place. So there was a lot of that was a controversial issue, and it got shut down pretty quick.
And then one of the other things going on this year, beginning this year, I guess, is every kid in the district gets free lunch.
That's correct.
And is it free breakfast as well?
Free breakfast and free lunch. About 41,000 students. It doesn't necessarily apply to the charter school kids, but yeah, they worked out a federal deal with the FDA and. Not the FDA, sorry.
USDA.
USDA. USDA. Wrong acronym. Anyways, yeah, they worked out a deal with them, so the kids are all going to eat for free this year. So there's not going to be the issue with kids not getting the same meal as other kids, or maybe being potentially embarrassed.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part of that is the stigma of school lunch, and that the fact that some, especially a lot of the older kids, are reluctant to take a free school lunch, feeling it's a stigmatizing sort of thing. So maybe this removes some of that. So
a couple other things. The district's still enrolling students. Are going to be doing so for several weeks. Apparently, typically they have kids enrolling through October, and so they're projecting about 39,000 students this year. So that's a drop of like 454 students from last year. So they're
but if we're at 41, how are we going to get to 39? Do they expect to see kids leave?
No. They're projecting by the end of the first quarter 39,000 students. So that's a good question. That's what she just told me yesterday. So she said that's going to be about 450 students less than this time last year at the end of the first quarter. So apparently the projections might have been off a little bit from what I was told on Tuesday.
Okay, and you said there was one other thing?
Yeah, they're hiring bus drivers too. Apparently they've got 112 routes and only 106 drivers. So they've got to hire some drivers to fill those spots. They added some buses to their fleet this year.
Don, any experience with bus driving?
Yeah, I drive my kids to school all the time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Minivan driver, maybe, could be. No? All right, maybe not. Darnell, college football right around the corner.
Yeah, OU and OSU are doing their fan days on Saturday. OU starts at 10:30 a.m. OSU's getting underway at about 2 o'clock or 2:30. So it's exciting time. A lot of excitement right now for both schools. USA Today coaches poll came out on Thursday, and OU was ranked 8th Oklahoma State's ranked 11th, so a
Did
lot of
you see who was
anticipation.
ranked 19th, though?
Let me look. Do I see Kansas State on here? Kansas State, 19th.
How
There you
about
go.
that?
Go Wildcats.
How about that? It's going to be a great year in Norman, I'm sure. What's the big news? I mean, OSU thinks they can contend for the Big 12 title, obviously,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
OU, of course, the first era of the non-Bob Stoops era. What's the expectation? Do we have a national title contender in the Big 12 this year? Can they play with the SEC?
I mean, it's going to be tough just because the reputation is down from the Big 12, but you got those two schools. I mean, they're 1 and 2 in the Big 12 conference, so it's going to depend a lot on what happens toward the end of the season with those two schools when they go head-to-head probably. But both teams have a shot. I mean, OSU is absolutely loaded on offense. You got Mason Rudolph at quarterback, James Washington at wide receiver, Justice Hill at running back, and just a host of other receivers in addition to James Washington at OSU. So, and then obviously in Norman you got Baker Mayfield back. They're getting some younger guys to replace Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine in the backfield. And
That's
then you
a lot
got
to
some,
replace.
It is, but you know you got Lincoln Riley, who's widely considered to be an offensive genius. He can really get that team going and clicking offensively. So I think both of these teams are going to be exciting to watch. They're going to put up a lot of points, and they're going to be hard for a lot of teams to stop. OU's toughest test is early, second week of the season against Ohio State. That's going to be at Ohio State, so that's going to be a really, really difficult challenge for them. If they make it through that, they got a real shot at being in that college football playoff.
Can't wait to see Bill Snyder take on Lincoln Riley. I mean, he's only got 60 years of experience on the guy.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I mean, it will really be a great game. Can't wait for the Big 12 to get started. Can't wait for college football to get started.
It's here.
College football or pro football, Don?
Yeah, I'm probably a little more of a pro guy, but I do follow OU. That's my alma mater. So.
Okay. So what's going on down in Bricktown? It's going to change the face of the Bricktown a little bit.
Well, this old cotton mill, Jen, that everybody's seen, if you've ever been to Bricktown, all these sheet metal buildings, acres and acres of them. There's really very little activity there now. It's been on the market for some time. There's been a couple of things that looked like were going to happen. One of them, they even looked at building the convention center there. All that stuff fell by the wayside, and now they have a plan to develop it. There's an outfit called Sooner Investment that wants to clear, that they've got permission to clear the property. They're going to divvy it up. They even have an idea of extending the Bricktown Canal into this area, and they would like to have retail there. They'd like to have office space there. They'd like to have multifamily dwellings there, and it makes sense because it's the most valuable piece of real estate in downtown Oklahoma City. It's a huge undeveloped plot. They've even looked at, there's been some concerns because this cotton gin has been there, or cotton mill has been there since statehood, basically, about how contaminated is this area. They said they've done some preliminary examination of it. Doesn't look too bad. So there's a lot of hope and expectation that this is finally going to get things moving. We will see pretty soon some demolition taking place and some of these old buildings coming down. So you'll be seeing some activity.
And this was the site where they had talked at one point of possibly putting the soccer stadium, or there was discussion of maybe putting a soccer stadium.
Yeah, Bob
there.
Funk Jr. had a whole concept for doing similar kind of development, different retail, residential, office space, and somewhere maybe down the road building a stadium strictly for soccer. And he'd like to. He's involved with the Oklahoma City Energy, and he'd like to someday attract an MLS team here. This is a decade or more down the road. But that whole project kind of fell apart. He just didn't get the commitments that he needed. He wanted help from the city. He wanted kind of a public-private partnership, and there were other aspects of it. We knew it was pretty speculative when he launched it, and it kind of went by the wayside.
Is the plan for a soccer stadium still being kicked around? Are
Oh,
they
sure.
looking at other sites?
Yeah, he's talking now about maybe Wheeler Park, which is down by the Oklahoma River. It's still very close to downtown, but again, this is way in the future. I mean, MLS is looking at expansion right now, and I forget how many teams they want to expand, but we haven't even applied for an expansion franchise yet. So we're looking years down the road before this could happen.
Well, Ben can talk about how transformative an MLS stadium can be for a community from Kansas City, Kansas, you know, our Kansas roots. It transformed a city, it really did, along with some of the other development that it brought.
Yeah, I mean, they built that development over, kind of what they've been talking about here. I mean, they built the Sporting KC park over on the Kansas side near the Speedway and the minor league baseball park and a bunch of other retail outlets is kind of what they'd like to make it here as a catalyst for a big development. But yeah, I mean, it's a hot league right now, and I think they're trying to get up to 30 teams, so they still have quite a bit of spots. I think that would be about 6 spots, but you know, there are a lot of cities that are vying for it right now.
And there was World Cup fever in this city. I mean, there's a large Hispanic population that's soccer crazy, and
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to look to move south. You know, the Energy has a lot of support, and they draw pretty good crowds at Taft Stadium, I think. But to build over, you know, not too far from the Capitol Hill area, I think that would be a natural attraction.
a lot of news, a lot of stuff going on. That's the kind of stuff you can read about and see online every day. Check us out. I think you'll like what you see. We'll see you next week.